Okay, welcome back. We talked about state law, and then I did an introduction to federal law, again, emphasizing that we are a federal system. We have two separate sovereigns, the 50 states and the state governments, and the federal government in Washington, D.C. So let's talk about federal law, and I want to actually begin by talking about a law that was enacted by Congress at the end of 2019 and signed into law. It was a bill enacted by Congress, and the bill was signed into law by President Trump. And it is very much related to the theme of Tiger King. The law is the Preventing Animal Cruelty and Torture Act. It's called the PACT Act, P-A-C-T. I will say that I think this law is going to be challenged in court. I'm not going to go into the specifics of the law, but I want to talk about the big picture. Does Congress have the power to make animal cruelty a federal crime? And why is this important? I think this is, by the way, nobody should be in favor and do anything to harm animals. That's first and foremost. So I'm not talking about the merits of the law. I'm now talking about the power of Congress to enact the law. How much power does Congress have? I thought the powers of Congress were to be few and well defined, if we were to believe James Madison and the Federalist Papers. Well, the thing is, Congress does, among the powers, the specific enumerated delegated powers that Congress has is the power to regulate commerce. And in fact, Congress has used this power, some might say exploited this power, to basically enact any type of legislation it wants. How? How is that possible? Well, think about it. What do we mean by commerce? Does commerce refer to, what is the meaning of the word commerce in Article 1, Section 8? Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the Constitution says, Congress has the power to regulate commerce. Now, if you define commerce narrowly, just to mean interstate trade between business firms or persons in different states, that's one thing. But what the modern Supreme Court has done ever since President Roosevelt appointed, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt was able to appoint 7 of the 9 justices on the Supreme Court during his 4 terms in office. The Supreme Court has now taken a very expansive definition of what we mean by commerce. And bottom line is this: under modern Supreme Court jurisprudence that began in the New Deal, even conduct, activity, even if it's non-commercial in nature and occurs in a single state, can be considered interstate commerce and can be regulated by Congress if the quote-unquote aggregate effects of this activity are spill over into neighboring states. It's called the aggregate effects test. And so Congress can not only regulate commerce explicitly, but Congress can also regulate commerce, under this broad definition, any activity that can have an impact on commerce. And so this became a huge issue during the so-called Obamacare debate. Obamacare was enacted by Congress during President Barack Obama's first term in office, and then it was challenged in the courts. In fact, the case initiated here in Florida, in Pensacola, Florida, in the Northern District of Florida. Federal court went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the issue can Congress, does it have the power to compel people to buy health insurance? And so the idea is, it's one thing to regulate commerce, but does the federal government have this broader power? And ultimately, it was a very contentious issue with Chief Justice John Roberts emitting the deciding vote, saying that this is not so much the commerce power, but the tax power, since Congress is creating tax penalties if you don't buy health insurance. Congress then has this power, thereby avoiding the commerce power issue. So torture to animal, or animal cruelty. This is a really part of a larger debate. Some call it overcriminalization of federal laws. We have federal laws criminalizing So many things. If you go to Twitter, if you have a Twitter account, I invite you to go at the account at a crime a day, and you'll see what I mean. There's just all kinds of federal laws and regulations criminalizing conduct that doesn't really look like it should be a federal crime. You know, that's so important. But under the broad interpretation of the Commerce Clause, courts have generally upheld laws enacted by Congress, even criminal laws that are not really explicitly about business or trade and that kind of thing. So this raises a very interesting question. Joe Exotic, if he were to be prosecuted, or somebody like Doc Antler, somebody else, some of these other people you saw that are running private commercial zoos in the United States that you saw in the series Tiger King. There's guys in Ohio, guys in Myrtle Beach, the Oklahoma Zoo, Jeff Lowe now. If they were to be prosecuted under the federal animal cruelty law, could they challenge the constitutionality of the PACT Act, that Congress has exceeded its powers under the Commerce Clause? And that's actually a very legit question. Those of you who are more conservative in nature or originalist in nature might be skeptical of Congress asserting so much power. Those of you more flexible or living constitutional in nature, we change with the times, might be more amenable, open to Congress, going with the times. What roles do the courts play? Well, I have to tell you, we have no idea because this case hasn't been brought yet, right? No one has been, at least as of the filming of this video, no one has been prosecuted under the federal animal cruelty law. But I am certain that when that day occurs, we will have a challenge to the constitutionality of that law, like we saw in the Wilkerson case. Except the challenge will be under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, the meaning of commerce. Does commerce really include the prevention of animal cruelty? How should we define commerce? This is even a more vexing question considering that trade in wildlife is actually expressly prohibited under another federal law. And we'll look at that next federal law in the next video.